Hello everybody and welcome. I'm International Master Lawrence Trent. We're here at the fantastic World Chess Club in Berlin, and today I'm going to be showing you one of my favorite games. A game I played many moons ago. I believe it was the 2002-2003 season of the Four Nations Chess League, and I played with white against one of the biggest names in chess, Mr. David Howell, Grandmaster David Howell. He wasn't a Grandmaster at the time. He was a very strong player, but nonetheless, it's a great little miniature. One of the only games actually I've beaten David in. David has got a terrific record against me, as you would expect. Of course, David later went on to become one of England's best ever players, top grandmaster, top commentator, and so on. So beating David at any point in his career is obviously a big achievement. The game really teaches us a lot about what happens when you neglect your development, when you lag behind in getting your pieces out. And it's a beautiful game in many ways, and I think we can learn a lot from it. I hope you enjoy it. We'll get straight into the action. So, I was white, and the game kicked off with pawn to d4, pawn to knight f6, so far so good. And now I played the move bishop to g5 on move 2, the Trompovsky opening, one of my favorite little openings that I played for many years, inspired by the likes of Julian Hodgson, Luke McShane, Mark Hebden, and various others from the UK chess scene who used this with extreme success in the 80s and 90s. By the time I played this game, theory on this opening still was not overly developed, and you can get very attacking games depending on how your opponent replies. And that's exactly what David did. He allowed us to get a very sharp game by playing one of the main moves, which is knight to e4, attacking my bishop. I dropped the bishop back to f4, and now David decided to immediately lash out at the center with the move c5. When this game was played, this was pretty much the main line. The main lines in this opening are not totally clear now. There are many different ways you can play it, but this is still considered to be one of the main lines. I now attacked David's knight with the move pawn to f3. And David now decided to give a check on a5. This is also the main line. The idea is to provoke white to play c3 first, and only then retreat with the knight. So again, we reach a very well-analyzed theoretical position where I play the most aggressive move, because that, in my nature, I'm most aggressive, to play the move pawn to d5. And now, of course, what I want to do is I want to establish a big center with e4, and get my pieces out and get developed. David now plays the main move, which is to drop the queen back to b6. It's done its job on a5, attacking my b2 pawn. And this is where, again, at the time this game was played, I played what was considered the main move, which is to actually drop the bishop back all the way to c1. I should point out that an incredible development after the year 2002 was found in this position, which is to sacrifice this pawn with the move pawn to e4. And if black takes this so-called poison pawn, and we're going to see in the main game as well just how difficult it can be if black takes this pawn, you can play the move knight to d2. And now if black takes this pawn on c3, black gaining 2 extra pawns, white has got an incredible concept. He can play the move bishop to c7. I don't know exactly who discovered this move, but it's one of the most phenomenal opening ideas that exists. I actually had 2 fantastic games in this line, both against top grandmasters, Cutronius and Hebden, where I won 2 really nice games. The idea of this move is that you cut this square off for the queen, and the queen is actually very short of squares, and you gain a lot of time against the queen, and black can be in big trouble. However, in my game against David, I decided to play the main move at that time, which was to drop the bishop back to c1. David played the move e6, and now I try and protect my center with c4. So I've lost a lot of time in the opening here as white, but I'm trying to get that big center, and that's going to be my trump. Now, the main idea, or there are a few ways to play this position with black. One really interesting idea is to take this pawn on d5, white takes back, and now to play this kooky-looking move c4. Opening up this diagonal. And the point is that if white goes e4, you can just ignore the pawn and play the move bishop c5. It's one way of playing. And black gets rapid development. Sure, white has got some big problems to deal with. The knight is being attacked, this square. Things can get very, very complicated. David, though, chooses a move which I think is still one of the more dubious ways to play, which is to play the move queen to b4 check. Now, on the face of it, this check looks decent because you're checking the king. And how do I react to this check? Because it looks like David is going to win a pawn. Well, black basically does win a pawn here. However, at what cost? And that's really what this game is about. You lose a lot of time. So I block the check with bishop here. David now can choose one of these pawns. If he takes this pawn, I get a bunch of time attacking the queen here. And you already have to be very careful not to lose this queen. In fact, the d4 square is the only square available for the queen. And after queen to d4, I think the variation can go something like knight here. And if you're super greedy by taking here, I think white can pretty much end things very soon with a move like knight here, queen here. The queen gets pushed around. And, after queen e6, I might have knight b5. I might be able to take. Looks very, very dubious. Black is just losing far too much time. So what David ended up playing is the move I expected after bishop d2. By the way, it's quite interesting. I've played bishop g5, bishop f4, bishop c1, and bishop d2. I haven't developed any other pieces. He took this pawn on b2, the so-called poison pawn. Well, I now bring my knight out, protecting the rook. Now I'm threatening maybe rook b1, and the queen is already in big danger. So David very wisely retreated the queen already. And this is where I played the move e4. So I've sacrificed a pawn, but in return for that pawn, I've managed to establish a big center, and now I'm looking to roll black over. So David now plays a very good move. He tries to block the center with e5. He wants to block the position, complete his development, and then claim, well, I've got an extra pawn. Show me what you've got. So white has to react very quickly here, and I do that by pushing the move pawn to f4. Pawn to f4 is the main move here, again, trying to open up the position. I was already familiar with this position. In fact, I think Hikaru Nakamura had a game with white in this, where black now played the move d6, and something like if there's a trade, knight f3, I think black can play either bishop d6 or knight d7 protecting this pawn, and he's doing okay. White has got clear compensation. I've got a big passed d pawn. I can get castled. I'm going to have action down the f file, but it might just be compensation and nothing more. Still an unclear game. But David shocked me with his move because I didn't believe it worked, and he played the move pawn takes f4. And I believe what David was expecting here was me to recapture this pawn back. Then he would go d6. He's controlling some dark squares in the center. Maybe he's all right. But David completely overlooked the fact that in this position I can play an in-between move, which is the move pawn to e5. Very powerful move, hitting this knight. And we can see that the knight has got nowhere to go. In fact, it has to go all the way home to g8, which is not ideal. So I'm 2 pawns down for the moment, but I'm going to recapture that pawn at leisure. Most importantly, however, what we see is that black's position is totally undeveloped. And here I've got an incredibly powerful move, the move pawn to d6. This move cuts the communication in the black position. It cuts it in half. It stops the bishop being developed. This knight has almost got no squares. It entombs the bishop on c8. And it also sets up a very nasty threat of this knight coming in, attacking the queen, and then potentially coming to this c7 square. So what did David do here? Well, he came all the way back to d8. And this is what's so incredible about this game. I believe this is move 14. After 14 moves, all of black's pieces are back in their starting position. This is completely unusual. In fact, I've never had a game of chess like this since then. So it might even be a record, I don't know. But clearly, you can't be happy here as black with all your pieces back home. Okay, so what did I do in this position here? Well, I believe here I took this pawn off on f4. Now I decided to take a pawn. David has to try and get some pieces out, and he goes g6. And now finally, I come into d5, looking at this square on c7. This is a winning threat. You have to defend against it. David was waiting for that with the move knight to a6. And now I decided time to get the rest of my pieces out. I've got absolutely no pressure here. With black so behind in development, my plan is simple. Knight out, bishop out, get castled, use the f-file, not allowed to get black to get castled easily, and it's going to be pretty simple conversion. David now played an interesting move. In fact, I believe he played this potentially even one move earlier, so it would have been like this. with this one here. I believe it was actually like this, with this knight on g1. And the idea was that in this position, if I take on h6, he was going to play queen h4 check. So excuse me, I've got the moves the slightly wrong way around there. And win my bishop back like so. But I just decided to ignore it. It would have been like this. I decided to ignore it with the move queen to d2. So he doesn't have this check, basically. There was a trade. Something like this happened. And again, the problem with David's position is that he's got so many problems here with his pieces that, realistically speaking, that he just can't, if he moves this knight, he's going to lose to a knight f6 check, and so on. The correct exact position that we reach in the game is something like this, where black now tried the move knight to b4, because now there's no knight c7 check. I took, and I believe in this position I simply castled. So, now we're looking down the f file. The position is absolutely terrible. David tried to protect his f7 pawn with the move queen e8, and now I played the move queen to d4. And this move here pretty much seals the game, because now I'm threatening e6, attacking the rook. Black's king can't move because I have e6 discovered check. And the position is, the position has been dead for a while now. But this is really just the end. David played the move h6, which is, again, he doesn't have any good moves. And there are various ways to play now for white, but with the f-file now here, I decided, you know what? Let's play the extravagant move. Bishop takes g6. Let's just break open the black structure. The point is that after f takes e6, I now have a discovered check with knight to g5. And if black now plays the only king move, king to g7, I have one more discovered check, two nasty knockout punches, and that will be pretty much the end of the game. I believe David actually decided to block with the move knight f6, but of course this was all in vain, because now I just take on f6 check, king g7. I believe I gave another check, the king came to g8, and finally I delivered this move e6, threatening checkmate here, and David can resign in good conscience. Apologies there for the slight move order issue. It's actually been 20 years since I've looked at the game. What do we learn from the game, though? What is this game all about? Well, we saw earlier on in the opening how David went for these pawns. He moved his queen a bunch of times, took a poisoned pawn on b2, and then with one small slip up in the center, his position was already irredeemable. It was toast. When you decide as a chess player to grab a pawn earlier in the opening, you have to make sure that your follow-up is sound. You're going to be behind in development, you're going to be moving a bunch of pieces, and if you're not careful, your opponent is going to have a huge initiative, just like I did. So be careful when you grab poisoned pawns, and on the flip side, when you're sacrificing a pawn, make sure that your attack is energetic. Make sure your attack is to the point, and put your opponent under as much pressure as possible before that dynamic imbalance that you have evaporates. Hope you enjoyed the game. Of course, check out World Chess here in Berlin. Check out the YouTube channel, subscribe everywhere, Instagram, and all the other socials. I'm sure I'll be doing another video again in the near future. Hope you enjoyed that one. See you in the next one.